Probably another 35 yards, I see blood. Now I'm out of my mind. Get to a spot where there's a little bit of a ledge and then an opening and then the deer. I'm like, this is an opportunity to take another poke at him. So I did. Boom. He turns, goes in the woods a little bit. I catch up to him. He's still standing. He's right by a brook, but his days are, they're coming to an end. My excitement took over again, and I fired another round and shot his antler off.
Welcome to episode 2 of Northwoods Whitetails. We're sitting down once again with Mark Beauchesne from New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. I am your host, Travis Williams. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Northwoods Whitetails. Mark, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. I'm glad to be here, Travis. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming up again out here in the Rhubarb.
You know what? That road didn't get any smoother. Sorry.
Well, I always tell people when they're like, hey, I'm going to come over. I'm like, what do you drive?
Yeah, you did ask me that, and then I giggled a little bit.
The funny part is, the way you came in both times is the back way.
Right.
But it doesn't seem like the back way because you get off the interstate and you can right here. But if you go the other way, it's all pretty much you got one little hill. I'll send you home that way so you can experience the smooth side of the road.
That's what the GPS wanted to do. So either way, I don't mind because it was a nice ride.
It's funny where I live. I go over the hill. I'm in another town. I'm super close to New Hampton.
Yeah.
If you go over the hill, you're in Samberton. If you drive down the road, I'm in Meredith. But what's funny is you can get the way you went. You can go another 100 yards and take another road that connects to that same road, or you can drive another, I'd say, mile or two, and you can take another road that connects, or you can go in the Chemung way, which is probably the most. It's the way I come most of the time, just because of my natural.
And that's that road I would have known from going in and fishing with Wickwas. So.
Yeah, so let's pivot for a second from this hunting talk. So Mark and I have known each other for, if you listen to the last episode, for between 15 and 20 years. It's
a long time.
Arguable. And it mainly was from my fishing guiding days, which I no longer do. I may do someday again. But Mark is a black crappie assassin.
I can do that.
You were a crappie killer. I don't think have we ever crappie fished together?
No.
Maybe that one time when you were over in Moultboro and I just stopped by and maybe jigged with you for like 8 seconds.
That was about it. We were gonna wrestle over your Tundra. That was it.
Yeah, there's 2 of them. They're not here. They're at my dad's. I was just talking to Pete Weeks the other day.
Yeah.
He's telling me about one of your honey holes.
Yeah. So Pete and I have had lots of conversations about crappie fishing, and he's got an older gentleman that wanted to go and catch them and eat them, and I'm all about that. And there's when it comes to fishing, there's not much I don't share because not everybody can do it the same way. Much like yourself, there's technique and timing and locations. I mean, there's a spot within the spot and all that other happy stuff those fishing cliches. But sharing information is part of what I do. If somebody succeeds, then you're taking a chance that they're going to share and maybe blow a spot up, but that rarely happens. And if it does, great. There's something else that's been left alone. It can't be your only spot. You can't just have one spot. But the also hope of sharing information is that person is going to call you up and say,
reciprocate.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I got this.
But it's also the camaraderie, and this is a hunting podcast, so I'm going to bring it back to hunting.
And there's a lot of crossover.
There's a lot of crossover.
Is.
I have some friends that are very secretive with everything. And I think hunting probably is a little bit different. Maybe not so much from ice fishing, because ice fishing can be spot specific. But you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
Number one. Number two, a lot of my joy, and maybe it's because I was a guide for so long, like I have friends that hunt with me, and I literally would get more joy out of them being successful than if I was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because that's, what it feels like for yourself, but it's that much better watching somebody else benefit from your tutelage
It's
and
amazing.
your experience. You're like, you know what? I not only can I do it for me, but look what I did for them. It is a very, it's kind of selfish. After you've done it a lot, and I've done it a lot, you get very selfish about it because you're like, oh yeah, I'll take you fishing.
I love it.
It's really for you.
It really is. You're
Yeah.
right. And I do it with hunting, and it's like, I think guiding both for hunting and fishing gave me that taste of it. And
Sure.
it's like, I also cherish it for myself, and I want to protect that for I don't want everybody hunting my spot, because then I can't go there, which I did experience fishing, especially when I started the vertical jigging thing, which you and I did a video on that was on, what was that publication? There was it.
Oh my gosh, that was so long ago.
My Fishing TV.
My Outdoors.
My Outdoors, which is a cool program that you were very involved in. Something like that I think should come back. But
It's all about delivery, but I'm going to cut you off because your whole thing here about fishing and hunting and those, it's really about that experience. And we hit it on the last time we were together, but I don't think it can be said enough is that, when you're guiding a moose hunter, it's your hunt too, or you're off with your nephew, or you're, deer hunting. It's your hunt also.
Oh, for sure.
You're part of that. And that's the thing that has been in me my whole life. Deer camp. I'm very fortunate to have a camp in the Northeast Kingdom. You've heard that before. And that was the week that I spent with my grandfather, my uncle, and my dad in the same space for 9 days. Some good, some not so good, some awesome, and some just, just unbelievable. That experience, getting back from the day's hunt, hearing what my grandfather saw. This is a man that had 60 years on the landscape. I think he's seen a thing or two, and the guy's shot a lot of deer. And then my uncle's perspective, who was, in his prime, was you couldn't follow him in the woods. He was fast, and he would just go, got on a track, and he would basically wear a deer down. My dad's a little bit more in his own little zone, and I'm trying to pull all those things into me as I'm learning as a hunter, and those experiences that you have through hunting camp, it's nothing like it. And that's my world. I mean, I'm unassuming with my hunting ability, but I have stories for days based upon what happened in that little space and the woods that surround it.
I think there's a lot to be said for that, and that's how I grew up. I didn't have a camp. There's part of me that wants a camp, but it's like, for me, I get, this allotted time off. It's almost easier in today's world to just go rent something, which is what we've always done. And, there's pros and cons. We rented the same camp from a buddy of mine, Dan, up in Pittsburgh for 20 plus years, and he sold it. I had the opportunity to buy it. Looking back on it, I should have bought it. Wasn't in the financial means back then too, so it probably wasn't even an option. But those traditions and those memories, the memories in the field are big, but the memories you have back at camp, in my opinion, trump those memories.
Absolutely.
My dad always had a tradition, which, I literally gives me goosebumps when I think about some of these moments. One of the first times I hunted, my father made me earn the privilege to go to camp. And I was a bit of a wild animal as a child. You've heard some of the stories.
Who was I with today?
Oh, no.
Joe Canfield.
Yeah, Joe's a CO for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department, and he went to high school with me.
Yeah, he's. You guys have met.
Yeah. Yeah, and I may have assaulted some classmates with my knuckles back in the day. Anyway, we'll table that. But my father had this, thing where, I really wanted to go to hunting camp. 13, 14, 15, 16, no. Finally at 17 or 18, I think it was 18, I had, gotten good enough grades. I'd been good enough, did my homework, my blah, 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 so that I was going to go to hunting camp. And I ended up dumping my gun on a giant 8-pointer and missed, and still haunts me. I think it was the next year, the year after, I shot a buck that was 214 pounds, 7-pointer, giant. So my dad has a tradition that he's done many times with his friends, is he takes the heart.
Yep.
And come in from camp, blah, 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 puts his stuff away, and they're all sitting there, what'd you see? Having beer, they're cooking dinner. And he'd be like, just something in my bag here I want to show you guys. And boom.
Yep.
There's the heart on the table, which, by the way, we eat and love.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't had deer heart, man, you're missing out.
It's just a muscle, people.
Thank you, Pete Weeks. He's the one that got us onto that. But some of those memories and traditions, again, outweigh some of the experiences in the field. But when you connect all the dots,
yep,
that's what makes it such a
one can't
culture.
happen without the other.
Right.
I mean, they are bonded together. It's the hunt, the food, the cold, whatever it may be. All those things, those memories are bonded together by that experience of the pursuit. And we go on a lot about this stuff.
Well,
you've had Del Green on.
Yes.
You spoke with Del, and I've known that man my whole life. His camp is the new one is 2.5 miles away roughly. We'd have to go by him to get to ours. And the same thing, you come in on Friday night and you stop at every single camp on the way in because everybody's anticipating the opening day, the next day, their stories, the catching up that you do. You haven't seen these folks for, 6 months, maybe a year.
Right.
And that's a unique community that's fostered in that small environment, that you could pick up a relationship from a year ago, just like that. Like it was never, like you just saw each other the day before.
That's awesome.
It is pretty neat. And, so the camp guys are.
And you've got some more guys that are some old timers that are in that area.
Absolutely.
We got to get on here. I met one of them at the Yankee Classic.
You did. You met Skip Lemire.
Yep.
Skip and Walt have the Tim Carroll camp in the Kingdom, and it's very iconic. The snowmobile trail goes right by it. Everybody takes pictures of it. And they've been on that landscape a little bit longer than the Greens, I think. I think that old Walt came in first. It's funny because old Walt and Bill Green Sr., were both state police officers in Vermont. So I don't know if that was a thing with cops up there or not, or just how they ended up. It was their escape from their stressful lives, I'm sure.
Sure.
I mean, I think it meant more to them than just deer hunting. But old Walt was an interesting character to be around. He was always happy to see you and always had a joke and just conversation. But they were talented musicians. Walt Sr., Walt Jr., and Skip. They all play string instruments, violin, mandolin, whatever. So in the heyday of deer camp up there, we call it from like late 70s, when everybody was there, myself, my cousins, the green camps were full, everybody's camps were full. If somebody harvested a deer that day, took a deer, killed a deer, didn't matter how big it was, the airwaves, because everybody was on CB then, was filled with music. Those guys would play some foot stomping music for about a half hour straight. Then everybody get in and come, have the conversation, congratulations, all these other things. A little bit longer, the music would start in again. So that whole party was across the mountain, for that.
That's amazing.
Somebody who shot a deer that might have a camp that was 8 miles from you. Everybody reveled in that. And a lot of it is because there just wasn't that many deer taken. Mm-hmm. It's still like that now. So when it happens, all the camps that are still there, it's a thing.
Right.
Everybody comes out for it. It reinforces that community, but also remembers the history at the same time. It's just, it's very emotional, but again, it's so much fun.
You're cherishing the suffrage, and again, another thing that you're speaking to that I certainly appreciate, and we talk about it, is like the meat, the end of the rainbow. Like, you have this experience, this camp, this successful hunt, the party, all the fun, and then you still get, like, I have a sense of accomplishment even to this day. I'm 46 years old. I've hunted a long time. I've shot a fair bit of deer. Every time I go into my basement and pull a package of meat out, I'm like, I did that.
Yeah.
And my family thoroughly enjoys it. I was just watching a cooking show the other day looking at new recipes. It's like endless what you can do with the game.
There's no end
to
it. I like to eat, Travis.
Oh, okay. I should have made you a steak tonight.
So no, that's all right.
Probably can. But yeah, it's I love hearing these stories because it's what as you're talking, it's making me account, these.
And that's why we tell the stories, because you've lived it or you've heard somebody else talk about it. And it transitions from hunters to just folks that like that type of relationships or value for your recreation. Passion shines through no matter what it is. I mean, it's, you talk to somebody who's an avid mountain biker, and they talk about the process and the sweat and this and that and the reward. You can feel that.
Sure.
Passion should come through, and that's the whole idea of telling these stories like you're doing here.
Yep. Well, speaking of stories, let's hear one. Let's hear your. I remember when I met Skip, he was telling a story about you, and I don't know if you shared it here.
Oh no. That's his story to tell.
Okay, so we'll table that one because we're going to get Skip on.
Skip's got a lot of stories, and he wrote a book. And Skip's one of those guys that kind of take you by surprise because he's sneaky funny.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah, I love people like that.
He is very sneaky funny, and you got to kind of be on your toes the whole time with him. His old man was the same way, Walt Sr. But we can go back to like 2003, I guess.
Okay.
So, my dad's there.
We're up to camp.
We're up to camp.
Yes, sir.
We're up to camp.
Yes, sir.
My dad, my uncle, my grandfather was 86 at the time, so his camp days were still there, but not this weekend. We had 6 inches of snow on the ground when we got to camp Friday. No big deal. That's normal. Overnight, it started snowing probably around 6 or 7 o'clock. And about the same time, the libations started flowing. It's Friday night before deer camp. And we were up very late. Very late. And I got up late, and everybody else got up late. Late meaning not 4 o'clock in the morning, opening day of deer season, you're going to go out and do your thing and be trucking and going all day. I've always been one to be, I had lunch, I'd have all my stuff in my pack, I'd be gone all day. That was my thing, and still is. So we get up, coffee gets going on the wood stove, and I'm making breakfast. I cook breakfast for everybody, uncle, dad, myself.
What'd you cook?
Eggs and bacon, toast. But
I can smell the coffee perking on the wood stove. I can taste the bacon.
The bacon, yeah, it's just getting you.
Yes.
But the thing is that everything went perfect. I never broke an egg. I never broke a yolk. Perfect fried eggs. No. Everybody's out talking about what they're going to do for their thing. So I head out behind camp, heading to the northwest. The snow is now knee deep, but it's powder. You can truck through that. No big deal. Come down the hill into this little valley, come back up, and it's pretty much straight down, straight up to get to an old log road. Get on the log road, and I start trucking up the log road, and you're feeling it. You feel a little sweat, and the snow in front of me just stands up, and it's 2 moose, 1 bull, 1 cow that were laid down, just completely covered in the snow. They got up, away they go, and I'm like, holy moly, that was crazy. Get up onto this clear cut where we had been seeing some deer sign during the fall when we were bird hunting, because that's kind of what you should do, is get out there and scout with a dog too. So I had intentions to get into this little piece, and I'm still standing in the clear cut. I can see the edge of the woods, maybe 45 yards. I'm standing next to this big white birch tree, and the wind is blowing to beat the band right in my face with all that fresh powder snow. And I was miserable. I literally said, "This sucks," out loud. And as I said, "This sucks," out loud, I look up and I see 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of eyes, 2 sets of eyes. And I pick up the rifle and I'm like, okay, grow antlers. And the one in the middle grew antlers. I let fly, but 2 deer take off. That one I let fly at went straight up in the air and straight down. And I'm now out of breath again because my heart's through my chest. Do I reach out to the uncle and my dad via radio now. What do? I mean, I was like, you just kind of lose it a little bit.
Yep.
You need a minute to compose yourself before you make your next move. So I made my next move. I went over to where they were bedded down, saw where they all scattered. Deer went up, went down. I saw where it went, and I followed it, and there was not a drop of blood. Well, when that deer went straight up in the air and it came down, it broke its right rear leg. And when it was moving along, that dangling right rear leg, I got that out, was sweeping the snow back into its tracks almost, but it was covering up the blood I didn't see.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought you were about to tell me something crazy like that's how you got him.
So it went probably another 35 yards. I see blood. Now I'm out of my mind. Get to a spot where there's a little bit of a ledge and then an opening and then the deer. I'm like, this is an opportunity to take another poke at him. So I did. Boom. He turns, goes in the woods a little bit. I catch up to him. He's still standing. He's right by a brook, but his days are, they're coming to an end. My excitement took over again, and I fired another round and shot his antler off.
Oh, man.
Don't shoot at what you're looking at.
Right.
He fell right after that, though.
Yeah.
And then I had to call my uncle on the radio, get him jacked up. He was on the other ridge. He ended up over on top of the hill. He was no good for dragging, but it was all downhill for me because I was as high as a kite. So we dragged down to an old logging road where my dad was able to drive around with the truck. In the meantime, on his way by, he picked up Skip because where was my dad going to get a deer? And Skip goes, I'm going with you. So I just remember the Toyota Tundra coming up the road, plowing snow, and then that was it.
What a sight.
What a sight. Yeah. And it was just elations from there. And like I said, everybody was part of it. We spent a lot of time at the Tim Carroll camp and celebrated with them. And later that evening, the boys from the Green camp came up to see the deer and celebrate. I mean, it's not not an every season occasion up in the kingdom that somebody takes a deer.
That's awesome. And what I love about it is, and again, I think it's where our culture a little bit has changed, is nowhere in this conversation have you or I even mentioned how big the deer was.
It didn't matter.
Didn't matter. It didn't matter back then. I feel like in today's world, and I'm guilty of it, I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't said, I want to shoot a big buck because I do, and I don't apologize for that. But I also think it's where we need to celebrate the hunt and the process and all that camaraderie more than the size of the animal. Because that deer, just like when you came in, I picked up a couple of what I call the bucks that are, just sitting here on the wall that I didn't mount. I mean, the reason I don't mount every deer I shoot is because I'm not a millionaire.
Right.
But if I could, I would.
Yeah.
If I could, I would. But,
You have different ways of honoring that, though. I mean, you honor it, that it's here and it's tangible, and you can see it, and you look at it and go, oh, yeah. And that story comes back. Or, it's in your freezer and you're honoring it in your belly.
Yep.
Those types of things. I've never been, personally, in regards to the deer thing.
Yep.
For me, it's the pursuit and the cast iron pan.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that matter the most. But everything in between should be gathering memories. I'll never say how big this deer was. I mean, it's the kingdom. It could be here or it could be here. But it's somewhere in the middle. That's not what matters to me.
But again, I guess what I'm trying to point out is that never just organically that wasn't part of the conversation.
No,
it's not the conversation.
It's not. It's not. And the tail end of the conversation is when that animal was taken to go get checked in Island Pond, and went back, and we're coming up the road, and there's 3 massive bulls together. And they were just there because I was coming through. That's the kind of things you see on the way back. And that's as much of that memory of that hunt as the deer itself.
Right.
But we'll come to the conclusion. We left camp, took the long way home, went over to Derby Line, and saw my grandparents. And that was enough for me. I mean, that's the thing that seals it, that, that the traditions have been preserved. These things are going to endure through not only your actions, but also your actions, making sure that the ones who came before knew what happened.
Right.
So they got the story. I had to tell that story a lot, but that was the most important time.
Right. Yeah. Amen. And again, my grandfather didn't hunt a ton, but my father, dragged me literally, like not willingly. I was willing, but just in the sense of like he had to drag me through the woods, making noise behind him, and he sacrificed so much to be able to give me the privilege of what I, grew to love today. Again, in the last episode we talked about it, but if you walk into my house, you can pretty much tell I'm into.
Yeah, it's clear.
A little bit into it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Speaking of which, see that 8-pointer right there in the middle?
Yes.
So that
you can't see it on the podcast though, but I'm telling you, I can see it.
You can see it. Well,
I see it right now.
Maybe I'll film it and put it on the podcast. But that was a buck that I shot the year Adelina was born, and I shot that 10-pointer in New Hampshire, and I went and shot that one in Maine. Tracked him, super fun hunt. But when you were telling the story, it made me immediately think of this hunt because you said to yourself, "This sucks."
This out loud, Travis, out loud. I mean, it was like that's the one thing you don't do. You're supposed to be quiet, right?
Right.
You don't talk to yourself in the woods.
I do.
Oh
man, it's a problem. I like a branch will like snap me in the face, and I'll be like, "You
mother."
Yeah, beep. Don't beep and beep. Snap. I'll snap the branch. Like, what are you doing?
You're just expressing yourself. It's okay. It happens.
So that buck, we drove all around looking for good, suitable tracking snow. I was hell-bent on finding good, quiet tracking snow. I'd been hunting on some snow, but it was crunchy. If you're a tracker, you know what I mean. You've got to have that just sense of, I did it once.
Well, that's the thing, and that's all I've ever done. Deer hunting. I don't know anything else. This one I happened to cross.
Right.
But nothing was moving in that storm. It's the next day or later that afternoon, that might have been an opportunity. But, like this fall, we had those ideal tracking conditions. But I had a wicked cough.
Ugh.
I mean, like you can hear me a half a mile away.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm wasting my time here. It was just a remainder of a cold. And those are the factors that, as hunters, or casual observers, they don't think about that stuff. I got a boot that squeaks, but it's my favorite boot. If it's dry ground, I'm wearing that, but you can hear it a mile away.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about that?
Right.
So when you have that right snow and all those contributing factors are just right and the wind is just right, but you got to fart or cough, did I just ruin my hunt or do I just take this and enjoy what why I'm here?
Well, and I often reference those as kill days. And, like, back to this one, like, I hadn't had what I would consider a good killing day, a day where I could get out of the truck, get on a track, and go and have a really good chance of catching this deer. And so I'll I won't bore you with the whole story, but the story that I want to bring up, because it was this sucks part, is we had driven around, and we could not find anything worth shit, really. And finally I found some tracks that had crossed down, and I'm like, you know what, Greg? It's 10 o'clock. I'm done. I need to get in the woods. The snow is knee deep. Just like you were
I described. Yep.
Cold. It was like 9 degrees when we got out of the truck. And I'm like, I'm just going to go down in here. And I just booked it. I didn't look at OnX. I didn't look at topography. I just needed to get in the woods. And I ran in the woods. Mark, I walked into the biggest hellacious shithole swamp you've ever been in your life. I mean, and I'm a stubborn, very stubborn.
Yeah.
I will...
It'll end at some point.
Right. I'm just going to keep pushing. Well, I kept pushing. I literally had to backtrack and crawl out of there. It spit me out. I couldn't get through it. Meanwhile, this is knee-deep snow, and it's cold, and then it goes from this thick to this just wide-open clear cut. And I get to the top, and the wind is literally blowing through my ear, like to the point where I'm holding my right ear because my ear's numb. And I come up to my buddy Greg, who I was hunting with, and he's all excited. He's in deer. Oh, my God. You see all those tracks? I'm like, I haven't seen anything except for a swamp and a bunch of cold. I saw an old doe track down there. I'm like, you know where I'm headed? I'm headed back for the truck. Screw this. My wife's due tomorrow, literally.
Yeah.
This is my sign. No. Come here. Look at this. And it was amazing. We got up over the top of that knob, and we got down in backside of that ridge where the wind wasn't hitting, and it was like the sun was out, it kind of warmed up a little bit, snow got a little squeaky. I ended up going down and getting on this buck's track and getting them, but I had to tie that in because it so much reminded me of your story.
Yeah,
because I literally said to myself, "This sucks."
It's okay. I mean, you acknowledged it and you persevered, and it's
No, it ended up being a real fun hunt, and the drag out was hellacious, and it was one of those suffrage memories that I go back to very often.
Yeah, hunting out of a camp is definitely different because you're gonna go from where you were nice and warm and just go searching for tracks because that's how it is in the kingdom, in the big woods. You know, you kind of have areas that you know are going to be, you know, potentials, but you got to get there, and you know, they're usually a mile. There's never anything less than a mile there,
right.
And it's all uphill. But boy, once you get going and you're out there, and that's just you
wouldn't have it any other way.
I don't know anything else, Travis. I've never sat in a tree stand, or what are those the newest things, the saddles, a hammock.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been in a hammock, but it was on a porch. That's about it. Yeah. So it's just not something that works for me, and it works for others. I mean, they certainly have success.
Sure.
So I can't discredit it at all, but this is the thing that I know, and I know what I'm capable of. And I'm looking forward to this year's already.
Oh man, doing these podcasts makes me want to go hunting, but you know, talking about, you know, different methods. For me, the method is less important than I want to shoot them on my terms.
Sure.
And for example, right up there, right at the top of that ridge, there's a big one. And I'll dabble here. I'll go for a walk. You know, I get out of work. Gosh, you know, I got out at 3:00. I can run out there for an hour. But in terms of dedicating any time to hunting in these woods, I because even though to some this is big woods, to me this is small.
Your backyard.
It's you know, I'm on top of that ridge in 15 minutes. I'm down the other side. I'm staying another road. Like, what am I going to do? Do a loop and hunt back through what I just hunted through? Like, it's just not what I like. I would rather shoot a deer on my terms than shoot a giant on other terms. It's just how, and I think that's kind of what you're saying.
You've encapsulated it, yeah. So it certainly is. I'm in the woods and I can see a ridge, and I want to be on that ridge, so I go.
Yeah. But look, there's another one.
Wait. You know, so that's part of it. But you get to there and you're like, okay, it's 2:00. What's the game plan here if something happens?
Right.
You know, so you have to be cognizant of that, and I think being ready for it might be a hindrance because now you're not as tuned in. You're thinking about, all right, I got to get my ass out of here. You know, get back to camp. I was notorious to showing up to camp in dark. You know, the first couple times I did it, you know, when I was 16 years old, my dad was like, "Hey, what's going on here?" I was like, "Look, this is what's in my pack. If I'm stuck, I'm not going to try to truck in the dark because it doesn't make any sense. That's where bad things happen, and that's where, you know, we hit on it the last podcast that, you know, hunters aren't called out on search and rescue. I mean, very few are. You know, it's those who are not prepared to self-rescue or deal with themselves. So that's one of those differences in hunting styles, is that the person that's hunting in a 5-acre plot, 5 acres piece from a tree stand or whatever, that's as far as they're going to go. Where, you know, someone who's a tracker, that's unlimited. That's up to your physical ability, your daylight, or what you've seen in front of you. There's a guy that used to work for the agency, and he is a monster tracker. His name is Will Stats.
God, I'd love to have him on the podcast.
I can get you Will Stats.
Oh, please.
He is a monster in the woods. Will and I have seen each other a lot in the woods. In fact, the first time I met him was in the woods before I even worked for the agency. And he's like, "Oh, blah, blah, blah."
That's cool.
And then once we got to work together, then it was the whole different thing. And again, instantly you get credibility because of where you play in the woods. I don't get it, but hey,
I do, because it's an instant relatability. Like, you get me because you do what I do. Mm-hmm. And again, that's back to that 4%. You know, 4% of people hunt in the state of New Hampshire, and then I think it's 5% nationally. So when you not only enjoy the passion, but you also enjoy like, oh, not only do you do this, but you do it like I do it, there's an immediate connectivity. It's the same with like, I've met people in the woods that I'm now friends with because of that connection. You know, a lot of the people in Northwoods, Joey Davis, you know.
Yeah, Joey, yeah.
I mean, Joey knew who you were.
Oh, yeah.
Just from your NEK, what do they call
it?
NEK. The NEK.
The neck.
There. So, but Will, man, got some Will stories. And I think I've shared this one before on the podcast, but when people a lot of times talk to me about hunting, Will is a guy that I think of often because, and he doesn't probably know this. If you told him who I was, he wouldn't know who I was, I bet, at all. But when I was younger, he would be at some of the check stations.
Yes, yeah.
And we'd check in our deer, and I'd always ask him questions like, so what's the biggest buck you've seen, and how did they kill it? So I was always inquisitive. And this one time, and I forgive all the listeners that have already heard this story, but there was a guy checking in an absolute beautiful 9.200. I want to say it was 225 pounds. Again, I was like 11 at the time. And so I'm over there and I'm asking him questions, and he's answering me because I'm a little kid. And he's like, yeah, I shot him tracking up on the Galloway. And then this other guy comes over. He's like, yeah, I saw your name in the book up there in the sign in the one of the huts up there. You know, so he'd obviously was, summited McGalloway either on this track or scouting or whatever that season. And so next thing you know, there's like this group that either they were with him or they just were swinging by, and Will knew all of them.
Right.
And they're all in this circle, and they're telling tracking stories. They're telling stories on the Golden Road and this and that, and I am just a sponge. And literally that day is when I decided that tracking specifically, I mean, I was already hunting big woods because my dad, instilled that in me, took me to Pittsburgh and big country all the time. That's like where we hunted. When we moved here, we primarily hunted the National Forest when we moved to the Lakes region.
Right.
Because we wanted, closer big woods.
Yeah, yeah. You get little more woods time, a little less travel time.
And then our vacation was spent in Pittsburgh or Maine or whatever. And again, there was an older gentleman there, and I said to him, hey, I want to shoot big bucks like you guys. How do you do it? And he goes, well, son, there's two philosophies I live by. One, if you want to shoot the big ones, don't shoot the little ones. Mm-hmm. Pretty simple.
Pretty simple.
Second one was the meat that goes in the freezer lasts a season, but the bones that go on a wall last a lifetime. And it really ties everything in. And for me, it's not just about the bones that go on the wall. It's not just about the meat in the freezer. It's not just about passing up the bucks to shoot the big ones. It's the whole story.
Right.
And that moment is when I decided this is what I wanted to do. And again, Will Statz and his friends in that moment was a big moment in my...
They were part of that catalyst and made it happen.
They were my idols. They didn't know it, but they were my Michael Jordans. I could give a crap less about, meeting a professional athlete. The first time I met Shane Benoit, I mean, I came home and was like I met Michael Jordan. Because that was my passion, and I could relate to that passion. I can't relate to dunking a basketball.
No, because you can't jump.
Dude, look at these calves. They're all show and no go.
That was surgery. You had surgery done for that. That's all plastic surgery there. Don't be showing that off again.
I can't jump, you're right. But my point is that was my passion, and these people. So I'd love to have. Hopefully, we can get Will on here sometime.
He would be fun. He's definitely a good one. And he spent a lot of his career before he went to work for the agency working as a forester. So his whole life is in the big woods. I mean, his whole thing. He worked for Champion, maybe even St. Regis before then. I don't know how long ago he was in that, but definitely for Champion. So that's all the stuff in the Kingdom and in Pittsburgh.
Craig Hall works with me. His father worked for the agency for a while. I'm not sure what department. And him and Will are pretty friendly.
Jim Hall, his dad.
Yeah. He was a big part of helping with the moose program to get the moose hunt up off the ground.
Jim was one of our hunter education coordinators for a long time. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's a small. Well, I mean, we could talk about small planet all we want, but it's just small state, small 4%.
Correct. Yeah, and when you start talking big woods, I think that it kind of shrinks down.
Shrinks down a lot. Yeah.
Like I said, like when I mentioned Joey, your name to Joey, Joey's like, I think I know who that is. I even mentioned it to Corey Ryder, who I tried to get to come to this podcast. And somewhere you guys met. I don't know if it was in the woods.
Corey and I?
The Maine woods?
Yeah, no. I know who he is. I don't remember where we have met, and I just don't.
Yeah.
Can't place it. I can't place it.
Neither does he. So one of these days,
Yeah,
maybe
you
we'll
know
connect
what?
those dots.
I think I do know.
Yes.
I think it just hit me. Oh my God, this is an epiphany.
Yes.
So Corey Ryder's listening right now.
He is.
I think we took a mushrooming class together
I bet you that's
in
it.
Loudon, New Hampshire.
I bet you that's it.
I did that for so it'll be like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe
Yeah.
9 years ago. And I remember the name. I think I wrote it down in the mushroom book or wrote it on a piece of a card or something. And I think it's in my mushroom book. I'll have to look when I get home.
Okay.
But that would be funny if I had that kind of recall.
Episode 3.
Mark remembers.
Mark remembers.
That'd be awesome. But it's likely I'm wrong.
It
But it
sounds
sounded
like it was
good.
something like that because he's like, because when I mentioned your name, he was immediately like trying to figure it out, like there was a connection there.
That'd be funny
Corey's
if it was.
Corey's a good dude. I love his channel. I love how he films stuff like silent and just sucks you into that moment. I tell him all the time, I'm like, it makes me want to be there.
Sure. Yep.
So
He's filming it for you. That's why.
I mean, he does a great job.
I mean,
his
that's
angles.
that's the whole idea is that, you have to put yourself in the place of not only the listener here, but, the viewers.
Well, and that's what we're trying to do at Northwoods is bring people along on our journeys, tell our stories. But my biggest passion is to do it what I consider responsibly. And, part of you and I have had a lot of conversations on this, but part of what I feel is like our responsibility is, for example, when I go hunting, matter of fact, I got a story. So one time, got to my truck, hunted all day, and I get in my truck, I shut the door, and all of a sudden, here comes this game warden behind me. And he shuts, gets out of his truck, and I roll my window down and say, "What's going on?" "Not much." He's like, "Hey, did you hunt up here today?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I followed your tracks, and you dropped a package of cigarettes on the ground." And I'm like, "No, I didn't." I'm like, "I don't smoke. I've never smoked. It wasn't me." Long story short, somebody had gone on my checking. I had picked up a buck track from the road. They must have been wanting to see what I jumped on,
Yeah.
and they threw a pack of cigarettes. And I said, "As a matter of fact, hang on. You mind if I get out of the car?" He goes, "No, go ahead." And I showed him in my pack. I reached in the back, got my jacket, unzipped my pack, and I had 4 or 5 empty crushed beer cans. You could tell they'd been in the woods for a while. And you could immediately tell. I don't know who the game warden was. This was years ago. I wish I did. But you could immediately see his facial expression change because he knew that he was dealing with somebody that cared.
Yeah.
And I said, "Listen, I take more out than I bring in. I'm not that guy. I respect that you came out here and did what you're doing, and we had a good conversation." I don't think he necessarily apologized, but he didn't. We didn't have any more conversation about it. It was he believed me, and we moved
that
on.
matter was resolved.
But my point is, I want to do things like that. I want to set a good example for the hunting community, and that example is, yes, if you're on somebody's land, pick up after yourself. Not only pick up after yourself, but pick up for others.
Yeah.
Because that's just it's your privilege to be on that land. And it's, in my opinion, it's our responsibility.
Yeah. I'm a proponent of that also. And my biggest gripe of anything that I find out there is balloons. They don't go up to heaven. They don't carry on that spirit. They come back down.
And they're
just
everywhere.
Everywhere. So
It's amazing how many I find antler hunting.
if the non-consumptive public was out in the woods recreating and they saw that, they would probably change their way of doing things if that was a practice that they did. So it's, we can lament about that all we want, but it certainly talks about having that respect for the landscape of private landowners and, what we do and how we do it has an effect on them and our ability to continue to recreate.
Right. Which, again, I think, you work for the department, so I'd like to maybe dive into some of the things. I mean, last time when we met, we talked a lot about access, the habitat fee, which thank you so much. I think that's kudos to the department for doing what they've done. I mean, some of that data that you shared with me is huge. And I think that with some more efforts, getting more of the 4% involved,
there's more to do. Yeah, there's always more to do.
It's going to be huge, and this is one area that I think we can help in. In the past, we talked about the camps that you were involved with. You and I have talked a lot about what's going on in the House, and maybe we can kind of dive into it now. We say House in the legislation with.
That's the safest way of saying it.
The cameras.
Yeah, so that camera bill is back in legislation. I don't know where it is right now. But as of this year, unless you're on state lands or national forest, if you're going to place a camera for taking of game, and that taking is also viewing and watching wildlife, etc., there needs to be a written permission from the landowner.
And I haven't read it in a while, but when I first read it, you also had to have a placard.
It has to have a placard on it that's visible and clearly legible from on the camera.
And is that also true? So I had heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if you don't know, just say you don't know, but I heard that even if you're on state or federal land, you still have to have the placard, but you don't have to have permission.
Correct.
So I can't just go put a regular game camera out without at least putting that out.
Correct.
And so you're saying it's in legislation now, is there more?
I think they're just trying to clean up the loose spots on that. So, for instance, there's not a provision in there for the landowner. Does the landowner have to put his name on it? So,
I would think no, but
I would think no also, but how would you not know if it wasn't nefariously placed?
Right.
So,
great point.
I think that's just clean up there. But there was a lot of back and forth with this camera thing in the community that I observed. I mean, mind you, I'm not knee deep into it, nor do I get knee deep into it because I kind of have to stay at a 10,000 foot view because we do serve many audiences here. My role is varied, so I'm not making excuses, but some of the sounds was, this is a bad thing for hunters, this is a good thing for hunters, this is a bad thing for hunters, this is a good thing for hunters. I look at it from my perspective at the agency as part of the program of landowner relations, that this is a good thing for landowners, but is also a good thing for hunters, primarily because now we're kind of legislating what we used to do back in the day, knock on doors and ask permission. Will people be said no? Likely, because most people may not want a camera on their property. Some people may be excited about it. You don't know until you ask that question. And I think it's how that hunter or user, because keep in mind, there are as many cameras out there that are placed by people that are wildlife watching as there are hunters. So it's not an anti-hunter thing. It's not a non-pro hunter move. It's an opportunity for us to make, mending fences again with our landowners. We ask permission, or we explain what we're doing first and why we're doing it, and then we ask permission. You don't barge in and say, "Hey, can I put a camera on your property?" It's like, "Hi, my name is, and this is what I like to do, and this is what I've been doing." And be quick, but be concise, and don't be mindful of people's times. And then ask, get that rapport. You talked about the sales side of things. This is what we're doing here, is opening that door. And you may find that they're intrigued by it. They want to know more. Can I get some of the pictures from you?
Oh, I was just thinking that, yeah.
And you're like, that may go a whole other direction.
Sure.
So just being prepared for a no is always your first option, but that's not your only option. So it's just a matter of asking the questions and asking them correctly. And be polite. These are your neighbors. Or even if it's somebody you don't know that you've hunted their land forever and you want to place a camera. And then, there's the non-camera people versus the camera people, and they're going to grind against each other on this as a whole, but they need to look at the big picture in this, that what this is doing is getting hunters in front of the landowners to be able to gain access, ask permission, tell their story, put a good face forward, before they execute what they're going to do on the ground.
Maybe even offer, like, hey, listen, if I can, will you? If if I came and raked your yard, would you allow me to do something like put a game camera out? You talked about your neighbors. I'm always, probably not as much as I should, but trying to offer a lending hand. My neighbor across the street's an elderly gentleman, and I've gone to the grocery store for him. I've gone to the drugstore for him. I've come over and helped him on many occasions. That's what you do as a community. And I think that you and I had this discussion the other day, and I got to be honest with you, you shifted my perspective a little bit.
Say it isn't so, Travis.
Listen, I'm pig-headed, but
I get it.
But I got a little bit of an open mind.
I gave you some time to think about it.
You did, which is a good lesson in life. I always sleep on it, but I have mixed emotions on cameras, and I don't begrudge anybody that uses them. I do think there's a small group, and maybe I bristle up a little bit because of my life experiences. As you know, I love hunting northern New Hampshire. There was a small group that were baiting deer in the yards. Mm-hmm. And subsequently, we lost our last week of the season in Coos County, which I don't believe we'll ever get back.
I don't think so. I think it's going to stay where it's at. So.
Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
And what I want all the listeners to remember is that when you have a small group that are doing things, whether it's selfishly or I don't know what the word is, but
they're not. They're inside their own circle. They don't see the harm that's going to come because they're only within themselves. And you can't call selfish is too strong of a word. They're isolated within their activity because they don't think anybody else is doing it or they don't see any harm in it.
True, fair enough. So when you're doing that activity, you got to be a little bit cognizant of potential consequence. And just think about it. Like, I'm a landowner, right? Let's say I'm a non-hunter. I walk outside and I'm just, maybe I've got my child with me and we're taking a hike. And I see this device on a tree and it's got an antenna on it and I don't know what it is. Chances are I'm going to go research it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to discover that it's, a cell phone camera that just took my picture and, how is that going to make me feel? So I think we got to be cognizant of people's privacy because, for lack of a better word, what you're putting out there is you're surveilling the game. It is a form of surveillance.
By definition of the word, yes.
And I often, when I get into discussions with friends about it, again, I don't begrudge anybody. If you want to use, I use cameras. I don't use cell cameras just because I don't particularly like the thought that it's surveillance, right? Because it's 24-hour, 7 days a week data that I'm getting while I'm not participating in that event. At least with a regular game camera, I got to retrieve it. I got to maintain it.
You got to check it, yeah.
I got to check it.
You're old enough to know about a game timer, trail timer.
Remember those things?
Oh, yeah.
They trip it.
Yeah.
Something walked by here.
Yeah. Or a tree branch fell.
Right. Who knows what it was?
Yeah.
But I often ask people when I get into a discussion about it is, let me ask you this question. What good comes from a cell phone camera, a game camera, versus what bad can come from it? Because it's what I do as like a sales guy a lot of times.
Sure.
Is I do the
Wise.
The A and B. Here's
Yeah.
A, here's B. So what's the good? What's the bad? Or what's the potential good and what's the potential bad?
Yeah, I don't want to answer that because I'm not.
There's an A column and a B column. I argue the B column's a lot longer than the A column.
Sure, absolutely.
And I don't want to create a riff amongst hunters, as we talked about before. I really don't. But I endearingly ask hunters to just think about things from 10,000 feet, like you're required to do because of your profession.
Well, that and it's yes, yeah. You're not the only one that looking at this. Yeah.
Because when we talk about access, when we talk about losing our rights and our privileges, we need to look at things from 10,000 feet. Is A bigger than B?
Right. I think that's always going to be up for debate, and that's why
you had mentioned
that's why legislation is there.
Yeah.
Because we can't legislate ourselves. We
police
can't
ourselves is what
police
I would say.
ourselves, whatever you want to call it. There are some nefarious users that they don't care what the law, what other people think. They're doing their thing. So we have to create legislation. This is one example. There's many examples of it.
Right.
You know, your speed limit on your road is 30 miles an hour. I could do 55 if I wanted to.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but I don't.
Right.
You know.
But
so
again,
that's one example. But I can give one side of that instant camera thing, and it's generational. So the tech generation is going to appeal to it. It grants them accessibility that they didn't have or they don't know how to get. Okay, so they don't know how to get that accessibility to that piece of woods, so they place this there instead of being there themselves because they don't have the time or the physical resources to do so. They take a shortcut, if you want to call it a shortcut, and take advantage of the technology. Is it too far? Is it too much? Is there? We're going to use the word fair chase, Travis, tonight. Is it that? And what does that mean? What is fair chase? A lot of people are going to ask that question. Like, you know, well, I was going to bring you a copy of that book today. Jim Posowitz wrote the book on fair chase, and he was a biologist, avid hunter. He went down the whole psychological pros and cons of what that is long before there were cell cameras or even trail cameras. So we can look at that type of definition of fair chase. What that is that it's you against the creature that you're pursuing. You know, is fair chase for woodcock hunting fair with a very good setter? Probably not fair chase, because that dog's going to win and find that bird every time.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have to shoot it, you know. So that some will say that, well, yes, I can have that camera, blah, 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 but I still have to harvest that deer. Well, the deer's still free to roam wherever it wants.
Right.
I just saw it when it was there that one moment.
And I played the devil's advocate a lot when I have discussions with people on this topic. Like, you know, somebody will say to me, like, well, that guy shot that deer because he had, 10 cell phone cameras in that small piece of woods. I'm like, yeah, he probably, that was a huge benefit, but he still had to go in and we're going to use bow hunting and set his stand and get the wind right and execute the shot. And so there's a lot of variables that kind of come into play. But at the end of the day, we have to police ourselves, because you think about like the technology that we have even today versus 10 or 15 years ago. And I think a lot of it's good stuff, right? Like, I think that game cameras have their place, but again, you have to police yourself. But like, the boots are better.
Oh yeah.
The Northwoods Whitetails Johnson jacket is better, right? The hats,
extra tough socks or
the darn tough socks.
Darn tough socks.
All these products are better. You can stay longer. You can go further. All these different things. But at what point do we say, okay, this is where we're going to draw the line?
Right.
This is no longer, in my humble opinion, when you have a device that in real time, in some of these, and I don't know how much you pay attention to it, but some of them are streaming now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're full on. Yep.
Some of them have solar panels.
Yep.
So you go out into the woods on national forest, you set this thing up, and and then you're creating this other division, which I absolutely hate, and that's the economic division. Because if I'm a guy who has infinite amount of time and an infinite amount of money, I'm going to go out and just pepper the woods with these things.
The 4% cannot afford any more division, Travis. So that's really where it's at. They need to, the ones that have been regulated by this shouldn't take it as an attack on them. It's not. They should understand that,
we're all in this together.
That we're all into this together. And one of the reasons why you're losing property is because of somebody else is misbehaving on it. They might have deployed a camera without somebody knowing, and that person got upset. Now they have to know. They have to be informed that you're going to do this. You have to gain permission for it.
And again, thank you for mentioning the 4%, because, again, the 4% should not attack each other. I couldn't agree with you more. And within that 4%, what we need to remember is, think about what we talked about earlier. We talked about why the woods specifically is an escape for people. It's an escape. It's tranquility. It's where you can hear your own heartbeat. But now
where we go to hear our own heartbeat. Yeah.
Right. So when you do those things, do you want to look up and see a camera that you can't take away the picture that it just took? Is that what you want as your tranquil experience?
I had stood there in front of a camera with two others where we went to go scouting for moose 2 years ago. And what do we do about that? I'm like, everybody took turns urinating in a particular direction, I guess. I mean, that's all you do.
I think about it. Like I look around, especially around here. So I did a hunt a couple years ago, one day with my muzzleloader, a day off or something. I was like, I'm just going to go. So I did a big loop. I went up there on the ridge, went all the way down to the road. There's a Class 6 road that cuts off, went over there, did it. I counted 9 cameras. I don't know if they're all cell cameras. I don't
somebody's device, yeah.
So I had to take a leak when I got down here, and I was looking left and right, up and down, like, because again, with a cell phone camera, that's gone forever. If I want to run for president someday, they're going to have that picture to.
They're going to have that. Yeah, they're going to blackmail you with that one. So you're right. I mean, that's part of it, but it's.
And again, but this is where we as hunters, right? Again, we're 4% of the population. We need to look at the pros. What are the good things that come from it? I think one, you shoot more deer. That's the only thing I can think of. And then you got B. There's a long list.
There is a long list.
Privacy, fair chase.
But those who use it have an impact on those who don't. So you got to be mindful of your whatever you do out there as a hunter. Mm-hmm. It represents the rest of the 4%.
Sure.
So,
but again, where we're under attack from so many different fronts, is it worth it for this one small piece, in my opinion? And maybe it's a bigger piece to other people. Again, I use cameras. I have cameras. It's not a big part of my hunting. And again, I go back to, you talked about the little trip thing.
Yeah.
What were those
Trail
called?
timers.
Trail timers. Do you remember when cameras first came out? What were they called? Do you remember what they were called?
Trail cameras.
Scouting cameras.
Or scouting cameras, yeah.
So if they're scouting cameras, you know what I mean? Like now I feel like they're, in a lot of aspects, they're hunting cameras.
The technology that's there now, I would certainly say that that's an accurate description.
So that's a major difference in my opinion, and it's also a major temptation. It's
sure.
like, I'm an analogy.
That's why it had to be legislated, Travis. I mean, it's, you can't hunt on that camera on the same day within 24 hours, blah, blah, blah. Now we have this one.
Right.
I think culturally, the hunting culture, and we bring in industry because without them, we wouldn't have what we have, the technology or the tools or the things like that to endure more time in the woods. They foster that. They want you to, here's the mole tree, pick your favorite brand, buck that he saw on the camera, and then there's the picture with it in the back of his truck kind of thing. That image creates the competition within us. We'll like share this picture of the cam. I've had that deer on cam for 3 years now. Does that mean anything to me? No. Does that mean anything to anybody else outside the 4%? No. What that means is that you're taking possession of an animal that you have no right to. That's in the public trust. You got upset because somebody shot that deer or took that deer or you didn't get it. You think somebody jumped it or moved it off on you. That's that animal's life. It's living its life. You don't have control over that.
And thank you for bringing that point up. That's another, in my opinion, B column. Mm-hmm. It's like I remember when baiting was a huge topic in the state. And that was one of my biggest things, is that people that tend to bait tend to call them their deer.
Yes.
I'm going to keep them on my property. They're altering that deer's behavior strictly for their reward. They're not doing it to benefit the deer.
That is not in the spirit of the public trust.
It's not fair chase. Again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of baiting, but like when you say things like, it's my deer, you get a picture of, oh man, where'd you get? I had pictures of him, then it's my buck. No, it's not.
Yeah,
it's our resource. It's our resource that we're all fortunate enough to.
A lot of folks have either lost sight of that or never had sight of it. Because it cannot always be taught and passed down from generation to generation, Travis, like you've experienced. Late adopters, meaning folks that picked up hunting at a later age or whatever, they didn't have that ethical background to understand that that's a wild animal. Just because you saw it on camera for 3 years or 7 years or however many you want to call it, doesn't make it something that you possess.
And I think that, so to kind of dovetail this whole conversation, that's where I find myself extremely passionate and rooted into some of the ideals that Northwoods is trying to promote. And that is to show people that you don't necessarily need to use cameras to harvest a deer, to enjoy and to cherish the journey more than the destination, and to understand that, like, I find that what we're doing within our hunting community, and probably not with intent or malice, but we're normalizing some of these hunting practices that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, people would have looked at you like, wait, what?
Why are you doing that?
You're doing what?
Yep.
Like, can you imagine telling Larry Benoit that, yeah, I put out 20 cell phone cameras and I got a picture of one at 4 a.m. when I was getting my woolies on, and he was a giant, and I went out and picked up his track and shot him on top of the ridge. He would turn over in his grave.
Yeah. So that's but hunting itself has changed in New Hampshire because, obviously the urban sprawl kind of changes the game a little bit, where baiting comes in a little bit more. Maybe the camera thing. I don't know. I'm not trying to justify any of it, but
right.
Where people got into hunting, they may not have ever experienced those big wood stuff, and this is all they've ever known.
And to that point, when you turn on mainstream media, like we talked about in our previous podcast, that's what you're seeing.
Right.
Right. So I've often had young men reach out to me on like social media and say, "Oh my God, nice buck you shot. How did you do it?" And by the way, I wanted to tell you, I only have two cameras because I don't have a lot of money.
Okay.
And I immediately get this cringe in my stomach. This kid,
so he can't be a hunter without 10 of them.
He's telling me that he wants to preface everything that we're about to have as a conversation as he only has 2 cameras. Because that's so normalized within our hunting community. And again, if you're in the Midwest, it's a different thing because you have, if you're lucky, you have a few hundred acres that you lease or you have access to. That's not what we have here. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I'm with you.
And I think that if we can tell that story, maybe we break through to a couple people that says, "Oh, okay, I'm starting to understand this now. I'm starting to understand that it's about the journey. It's about the connection with your food. It's about the connection with your friends and family and telling those stories and passing on this heritage." But I think the more that we normalize these behaviors, and again, I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with it. It's a debate we're having, right? It's a conversation.
Sure, and that's how it should be. It should be faced as a conversation that for many people, this is how they're going to hunt. They're not going to be in the whites trucking over mountains. They don't have the time. They don't have the conditioning. They don't have the wood skill set. They're probably comfortable in a 10-acre plot. So maybe that 10-acre plot has been monitored. Pick your favorite word for that one.
Surveilled.
Pick your favorite word. This is hunting for them, and it's having some acceptance of it. I mean, I don't have an opinion either way because probably the majority of that 4%, they hunt in these small plots, and they take advantage of these resources that they have to them, that technology has brought to them, and it's probably made them more successful and kept them in the sport a lot longer. Travis, the story I told you of shooting that deer in 2003 was the first deer I ever shot. I hunted in those big woods for 26 years before I killed a buck. That's not normal. Someone getting into hunting wouldn't go 26 days without success.
Well, and especially in our society today where we live a different world.
We have to have that gratification.
Immediate gratification, which again, I think is something that we slowly as a society chip away at to kind of swing that pendulum, if you will. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do it. You're not going to do it, but maybe collectively we can make a little bit of a movement.
Yep. Because we're the storytellers, they're the listeners. at some point they need to be transitioned into the storytellers. And I mean, I could sit around and listen to a lot of stories around campfires or at a camp or even in your porch here, and it's not going to be, well, I was sitting by the bait pile and it's not going to engage me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the thing that keeps me hanging on to hear the rest of the story and how it ends. So the adventure needs to be picked up again by the next generation, the next storytellers.
Right. And again, I gravitate, like if I turn on the hunting channel, it's usually elk hunting in the Midwest because there's an adventure, they're sleeping in the woods, they're hunting from their backpacks. And again, I think that when you look at how we like to hunt, and again, I'm not saying that the way that I hunt is the end all be all, but there's a story and there's an adventure in that. And I think if we can get other people, especially the youth, the next generation, to get a little bit excited by that, and excited by, not necessarily the destination, but to cherish the journey. A good example is like when we come home, when I get out of the woods and my dad picks me up in the truck, first thing he always says to me is, "How was your hunt? How was your hunt? How did your hunt go?" Not, "Did you see any deer? Did you shoot a deer? How big was he?"
Right. That's not part of the conversation. Yeah. And it shouldn't be. I mean, that's the stuff that stays untold, until it's there in front of you. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I see that there's going to be the urban city deer is a television show.
Sure.
Basically showing people and explaining on how to hunt deer in downtown Manchester, basically.
Right.
Deer are living in those spaces, and they need to be managed. Unit M, pick your others that are, a little bit more populated with people and houses and stuff like that. But the deer population is just thriving because of, it's living off the edges,
Sure.
where things have been manicured and cut and things like that. So there's new growth, et cetera. All that habitat that the deer likes, people create by making space for people in their backyards.
Yep.
So that needs to be managed. That herd needs to be managed in regards to its health, et cetera. The deer that's down in, pick your favorite spot in Allenstown or any place in Unit M is not the same in Alexandria or the same in, Errol. Those are probably three different deer that act three different ways.
And you're going to have different strategies to hunt each of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but they're all tools to make it happen.
Sure.
They all are part of that management piece. So there'll always be folks that are hunting these small tracks and doing things. But there's only the storytellers like yourself that are doing these other things that the folks that are hunting small tracks can live vicariously through and have a level of respect you hope for. You know what I mean? I think that's what should be coming through here is that, that sounds really cool. I'm digging those guys for doing what they're doing. They may not ever do it because they're happy with what they're doing and how how their deer hunting is going. It may never be your style.
Sure.
Yep.
So,
but they have some way of relating to you through this podcast.
Sure. And, I often play devil's advocate too. And I say to myself, like, we could have the same exact conversation as it pertains to how we started this podcast, fishing.
Right.
And some of the technology.
Oh, yeah.
That they now have. I mean, I don't know if you've used a live scope.
I don't even say that word.
But it's
not me. Yeah.
It's insane.
It is.
And, I'm also not going to sit here from a high horse and proclaim that I'm some sort of purist, because I'm not. I hunt with a rifle. I hunt with a lot of technology. I'm a huge fan of Onyx Hunt. So it's just a conversation, and I don't think, you or I are going to settle it. I think it's worth, again, back to my A and B. A, good, B, bad. What outweighs what? We need to manage each other. We need to police each other. We're 4%. Let's just try and do better.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo that and say, that legislation has forced the hand for people to introduce themselves to the people who own the property that you've been recreating on. It's just the right thing to do.
And I think if you guys didn't listen to our first podcast, please listen to that one. I don't think you have to listen to that one before this one, but they really tie in together. Educate yourself on the habitat fee, where those funds get appropriated. Northwoods whitetails will at some point have some sort of data out there for you to access so that you understand how good this program is. And again, I can't speak on, because I'm sitting down with a New Hampshire Fish and Game guy right now, but I can't speak on Vermont's, but they have one. I'm sure Maine has a similar one.
Yeah, they do.
These funds get matched 3-1 by the Pittman-Robinson Act. And once again, Mark Beauchesne, thank you so much for taking the time.
This was fun, Travis.
It was a really good time. And man, I learned a lot. What was that thing again about the carbon?
Oh, you want to leave them a cliffhanger with carbon sequestration?
Carbon sequestration and carbon
storage.
Google that, listeners. But again, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.